Good evening. Well done. Well done. Thank you. I'm Erica Smith, Dean of the College and Vice President for Retention and Success here at Connecticut College. Thank you. And I just want to say that I am filled with such joy and gratitude as we welcome you here to Connecticut College for our signature One Book, One Region event featuring author Dr. Daniel Black and his novel, Don't Cry for Me. I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation, and I'd like to begin our time together by acknowledging the land that we currently occupy and to honor the Native peoples who were its first inhabitants. Specifically, we honor the Mashantucket Pequots, Eastern Pequots, Mohegans, and other Native nations who are indigenous to Namiag, now called New London, and the land surrounding coastal Algonquin, also known as the Long Island Sound region. We acknowledge that Indigenous peoples have cared for this land over many generations and know that they have endured suffering and violence through the historical period of settler colonialism and its legacy. Today, we strive to retell and tell the complete stories, to repair the harm, and to live together as neighbors in this region. Thank you. In a moment, you will hear more about the One Book, One Region initiative and its importance to our community. And then we will introduce tonight's featured guests. After the discussion, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. We could not have planned tonight's events without the support of our community partners. So I would really like to thank Bank Square Books, who you all saw outside of our space, who have provided text for us this evening. I'd also like to thank our Office of the President. Our president is here tonight, and you'll hear from her shortly. I'd also like to thank UConn Avery Point and Mitchell College, who are also represented in this space. Our mighty, mighty on-campus team who, everybody from communications to media tech to our interpreter, Joy Valenti, who's interpreting for us. And of course, Christy Pascalides from my office, who brought every single detail together to make it all happen. So thank you. And I'd also, of course, want to thank the libraries of Southeastern Connecticut that started this initiative 22 years ago and have made such a rich legacy here for us in this region. So thank you to the libraries. So at this time, I will invite Christine Bradley, who's here representing One Book, One Region, to say a few words. Christine?
Thank you, Dean Smith. Good evening. Good evening. As a representative of the Mystic and Noank Library and the libraries of Southeastern Connecticut, I am just delighted to be here celebrating the power of shared reading and community dialogue. One Book, One Region, now 22 years young, is a testament to the importance of literature in bringing us together, fostering understanding and enriching our lives. The libraries of the region are proud to partner with Connecticut College in this initiative. We believe in the transformative power of books and the conversations they inspire. We are particularly excited to welcome Dr. Daniel Black this evening and to engage in this powerful work, Don't Cry for Me. We hope that this event will encourage further reading, discussion, and connections throughout our community. It is now my pleasure to welcome to the stage Connecticut College President Andrea Chapdelaine.
Good evening. Welcome. We are so deeply honored to have Dr. Daniel Black here in conversation with us for this year's One Book, One Region event. I have the privilege of introducing both Dr. Black and our very own Dr. Coker, who will lead what I am sure will be a deeply engaging conversation. None at all. Dr. Daniel Black, a native of Kansas City, spent his formative years in rural Blackwell, Arkansas. He graduated from Clark College, now Clark Atlanta University, where he earned the prestigious Oxford Modern British Studies Fellowship and then studied abroad at Oxford. He was then awarded a full fellowship to Temple University, where he studied with the Black Arts Movement poet laureate Sonia Sanchez and earned his PhD in African American Studies. Dr. Black has spent the majority of his academic years as a professor of African American Studies at his alma mater, Clark Atlanta. In addition to Don't Cry for Me and its recently published sequel, Isaac's Song, I have to admit, I've been a little busy my first year. I didn't know there was a sequel, so I'm so excited. I almost wanted to skip and just stay home and read it. You know, when you have a really good book to read? Anyway, Dr. Black's published works also include They Tell Me of Home, The Sacred Place, Perfect Peace, 12 Gates to the City, The Coming, Listen to the Lambs, of course, Don't Cry for Me, and Black on Black. It is not surprising that Dr. Black has been honored and celebrated for the excellence of his work. The Go On Girl National Book Club named him Author of the Year in 2011. The Mid-Atlantic Writers Association bestowed the Distinguished Writers Award on him in 2014. Also in 2014, the Arkansas Center for the Book at the Arkansas State Library selected his work for the If All Arkansas Read the Same Book program. Of course, we, Connecticut, caught up last year and included Don't Cry for Me on the All Connecticut Reads roster of books. It made such an impact on our regional team that we just had to have Dr. Black join us to share more deeply about this work. We are so looking forward what we know will be a promising and deeply enriching conversation. Part of the reason for that, again, no pressure, is because we have Dr. Kendall Coker, Assistant Professor of Psychology here at Connecticut College, with us to facilitate the interview. He is a clinical psychologist with a specialization in forensic psychology and is also an attorney. His primary research interests include the study of trauma, substance use, juvenile delinquency, and aggression and violence. He has recently published in several research journals, including Behavioral Sciences and the Law, Aggression and Violence Behavior, Journal of the American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law, and Addictive Behaviors. He is the co-editor of the American Journal of Orthopsychiatry and which is the principal publication of the Global Alliance for Behavioral Health and Social Justice. He has served as a member on the Juvenile Defense Resource Institute at Northwestern University School of Law and continues to work with state officials, nonprofit organizations, and local stakeholders to mitigate the harm of gun violence and advocate for common sense gun legislation. His research also explores racial and health-related disparities in the criminal justice system and the contributing impact of systemic bias and discrimination. With his deep and expansive expertise, I can think of no better conversation partner from our campus for this event with Dr. Black. So please join me in thanking Dr. Coker while also giving our warmest and most enthusiastic welcome for this college and this region to Dr. Black. Thank you.
All right, am I all mic'd up? Okay, perfect. So before we begin, I actually want to talk a little lighthearted story about our first interaction with each other about the book, and then I'll get into the gravity of this topic. I remember, I'm sorry to laugh, when I reached out and I said, "Hey, I read the book," and I said, "I got to tell you, there was one part that really stood out to me. It was the part where the kids would go into the batter, the cake batter, and lick their fingers and stuff." Woo. And I had this nostalgia about my grandmother. And I remember it kind of was like this shared experience of like my grandmother used to do it on Sundays.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I knew we were doing this. So I reached out to my mother and one of my close friends. And I actually reached out to one of my close friends in Chicago only to ask him if he has any memories of doing that same thing. And I said, "Hey, I got author Daniel Black, Don't Cry for Me." He was like, "Oh, I read that." And I was like, "Wow, so you know which part I'm about to ask you about, right?" And, and we started talking about the cake batter story. And he said, "Oh, it was so good." And he said, he said, "One of the reasons why they used to do that, they wanted to make us do the dishes after." And I said, that's a good one. That's a good one. And then when I spoke to my mother about it, my mother said, "Yeah, I remember." And I remember my grandmother, she would make the cake. And if the cake actually didn't come out the way she wanted it for the church, she would give us that cake and the batter. And then she would make a new one, right? And so I kind of had this like nostalgia which really kind of sucked me into the book as well. Now, as I go into now the book, one thing that really hit me before we did this, there are many states now where we couldn't even talk about this book right now.
That's right.
There are some states where this dialogue is not even acceptable.
That's right.
And I think now through that lens, I want everybody to really appreciate that right now as we sit with that reality, that this is the type of book, as powerful as it is, they would want this off the shelves.
That's right.
And so I read it twice. And something
I did too.
Yeah, right. And before I throw my first question at you, something very powerful and unexpected happened to me when I was reading the second time. The second time, I realized I was absorbing it as a father raising a Black son. And it totally caught me off guard with regards to how much it was hitting me as I think about parenting and intergenerational trauma and things of that nature. So with that out there, I want to ask very kind of open-ended question. What contributed to your desire to write this book? Like what was kind of the impetus of it?
First I want to say thank you, of course, Doc. Thank you, Connecticut College. Thank you, all the folks, for coming out on this evening. I'm really just absolutely ecstatic to be here. I have to tell you, though, that it's spring in Atlanta. And
All right.
and so when I got here, I said, well, then it's spring everywhere in America. But it's really not. It's really not. I got off the airport in at Green Airport, and I was like, whoa, Providence, what are y'all doing here? But I am thrilled to be here. I'm really excited to be here. I wrote this book. I teach at a Black college in Atlanta called Clark Atlanta University, and this is my 31st year on faculty. And I wrote this book, I think, because every year at graduation, students tell me, "Oh my God, Dr. Black, I want you to meet my mother. I want you to meet my mother. She's coming for graduation." Mm-hmm. And I always ask, "Is your dad coming?" Right. And people be like, very often kids are like, "Yeah, he's coming too." Yeah. And it's always an afterthought, a second thought. And so for years, I've wondered, what is it we as Black fathers have missed? What have we done incorrectly, or what have we done poorly, such that Black children's hearts are not as tethered to us as they are to their mothers, right? And what are the ways that masculinity absolutely, in many ways, suggests and in some instances insists that we are not tethered that way to other human beings. See, I think masculinity, our definitions of masculinity, is the real culprit here. But this is Black people, white people, all folks in America, right? And so I've been very concerned with how we get children really emotionally tied to men. You know, we live in a culture where really people are afraid of men with children, right? This is one of the reasons I think we even call girls to babysit, right? Very few people call a 14-year-old boy to babysit any child, right? And so I've been very concerned with that. And so I wanted to write this book to see if we could plant the seeds of a kind of healing, right, between fathers and sons. And if we could begin to announce that vulnerability is not only okay, but is a beautiful thing, right, for men to share. And to be so bold to see if I could even maybe kind of suggest that vulnerability becomes a requirement, right, for what it really means to be an upstanding man, right? And so I think that was kind of my impetus to really see if I could force men into conversations about the heart and about vulnerability that really would hopefully change lives.
And interestingly enough, there is this belief that we need to protect our Black children from the world, right? And maybe through that process, we may be harming them when in fact we're thinking we're protecting them, right? And I think with this one quote, if I may read it, which kind of jumped out at me, was when granddaddy got through with you, you'd have to go somewhere and sit down, but he loved me. I understand that now. His behavior was simply the way of Black parenting. Every child I knew was beaten senseless. Elders were callous and unfeeling as if afraid to love us. Slavery had left them that way.
Yes, yes. You know, one of the inheritances of 400 years of bondage was that Black people did this very tricky thing of trying to figure out how to look unattached to children publicly. But why? So that those who were in domination over them would not use the selling of their children as their first form of punishment, right? The problem, though, is when you're doing this trickery, if you will, when one is playing this this game of subterfuge, right? This subversion with trying to figure out how people can never know how much I adore my child, right? So that they don't sell my child for me. The problem is that the child doesn't know it either, right? And by the time you explain it to the child, the wound of feeling rejected is already deep-seated and bleeding, right? So it's like, how do you ever fix this? Well, you don't. What you do is you're just glad that the child didn't get sold. That becomes the beginning and the end of the act. Not knowing that, in fact, it has planted seeds of generational trauma, because this is just the way it seems like this goes. You know, no, you don't have to read to your kid. No, you don't have to kiss your kid at night. You don't have to pray over your child. You tell them, sit down somewhere. In other words, obedience becomes the main thing by which Black parents measure excellence in parenting. Can you do what you are told? Because if you can do what you are told, perhaps we can keep you alive. And that's the achievement in and of itself. The problem started when all of a sudden, then years later, we're going to play with this thing called integration. So now you're going to put Black children next to other children, right, whose parents come to PTA meetings, right, whose parents kiss them when they get out of the car at school, right? Now we're going to raise a generation of kids, all of whom are watching the Waltons, right? We're all watching Leave It to Beaver, right? Mm-hmm. And Black kids are now wondering, well, what the hell is wrong with, I mean, wait a minute. How come my mama don't do that? You know, why didn't my daddy do that, right? And so now children feel this cultural neglect, right? As if something is wrong with Black people, right? Not really understanding that the survival of Black people actually depended literally upon our ability to pull off the act of not caring.
Trying to figure out what to do with all of that.
Well, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And there seems, I wonder to what extent, you know, through the book, you hear this, like these conflicting feelings.
Yes.
by the father.
Yes.
Well, on the one hand, he's asking for forgiveness,
Yes.
but then struggling
Yes.
at the same time with accepting his son.
Absolutely. Because see, but you know, I'm a university professor, so sitting in this chair is really messing me up.
Hey, same. You know
Right.
what? We could just walk.
I have to really
I'm
tell
sitting
you
here, I'm struggling
That
too.
this chair is like a bondage for me.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah, I don't
I'm
really know.
glad I'm not alone
See,
in
I
this.
don't
I'm
know.
like, you see me going like this.
I don't really know how to do this. You know.
Right.
In fact, we don't even have chairs. That's not true. That's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
true.
yeah.
The reason that's important and profound is because Jacob is struggling.
Mhm.
Because what Jacob is really struggling with is, why am I saying I'm sorry when I gave everything I have? Sacrificed my entire life for this boy.
Mhm.
Then what in the hell am I apologizing for? But he knows, right, that there are things Isaac misses, and that there are ways Isaac is wounded. That is his fault. It's his fault.
Mhm, mhm.
He's clear about that,
Mhm.
right? What he's troubled by is, it is also true that there are excellences, if you will, in Jacob that Isaac has never recognized. And you know, he said, you know, listen, you know, I worked every damn day of my life. I paid for a house. You went to school because I paid for it. You took piano lessons, boy. I bought a piano. A poor black man working at the post office bought a piano.
Right.
And you talking about you wounded? You know, traditionally black people tell you go to bed. You know, but he's clear, you know, once he becomes a reader, that there are ways that he treated Isaac, right, that absolutely scarred him for life, right? What Jacob is not clear about, and I'm not sure a lot of parents are even today, is that a person can be excellent and flawed. We think that flaws means then that you're not excellent. That's not true. A person can be excellent and flawed, right? And the day we get clear about that, parents will be able to forgive themselves before the sun goes down, right?
Mhm.
Instead of spending a lifetime beating myself up because my child just didn't turn out the way I wanted them. Oh my God, I think there were days when I wasn't as loving as I wanted to be. Some days I was tired. All of that's true. All of that's true. But the truth of the matter is 99% of parents actually did too much, right? We actually gave too much. It's never true. It's like you don't have to stare at a seed once you plant it.
Right.
Right? The seed is really strong enough to withstand the storms of the world. Your job is to plant it. You don't have to come check on the seed every day.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Just in a minute, it'll bloom. But yes, it rained. Yes, the sun was out. Right? In other words, it is not the job of the farmer to control every single aspect, right, of the seed's cultural milieu, if you will. Right? But often as parents, we think that's our job. Right? And really, you're exhausting yourself. And the child won't remember half of what you do. Right? It's true.
Or they remember the things you don't want them to remember.
And sometimes that's true too.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to remind them of the other thing. Right. And so this story is the story of a man who believes he tried so hard. In fact, he provided a life for his own son that is so unbelievably different from the life he had.
Yeah.
Right. And he's troubled in his soul. And he's also troubled because he dreamed of a son, but that ain't the son he got. You know, and so what happens when you birth a child that's not what you wanted? You know, no parent is going to say it out loud, but it happens all the time. You know, what happens when you look at your child from a distance and you're like, okay, God, I'm going to endure this, but if I had my way, I'd return this to sender, you know.
Right.
And Jacob experiences that. But what Jacob also begins to realize is that as parents, you don't simply remake yourself when you have a child. A child really isn't you. I mean, a child really is not you. You know, and I'm emphasizing that because we think, well, you know, the child ought to be me or something like me because they came from me. That's not true at all. The child really isn't you. Really, you know, as Khalil Gibran says, really children simply come through you. Right? But they're not remakes of you. right? And so in many instances, the best thing you could do is discover who your child is and get mature enough yourself to let the child be that.
And one thing when you talk about flaws, it's okay for our children to see that we are flawed.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
father struggled with that.
Yes.
Because remember, he said half of the stuff I couldn't even do and I made it up.
Yes.
Hell, I could catch what he said, a rabbit. He said
Yes.
catch a rabbit.
Yeah.
And he said all of these things that I know I couldn't do. But it was almost as though he wanted to impress his son.
Sure.
And he wanted his son to believe that he was everything that he never became.
Absolutely. All parents do it, right? We all lie to our children. We do it all the time.
Yeah.
We do it all the time. We tell a child, listen, I want you to, every day you come from school, I want you to hang up your clothes. I want you to do your homework, right? As if we were excellent students, right? Some of us were.
Was it do as I say, not as I do?
But many of us were not.
Yeah.
Right? We'd probably do better if we sat down and just read a book and the child just simply watched us, right? We want them to read as we're watching television.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
And we want them to,
We want them to want to read.
we want, exactly, right. But I don't know that most of us are nearly as excellent as we present ourselves. But the truth of the matter is we don't have to. Children are never looking for excellence in parents. We think children are never looking for that. What a child wants, right, is for a parent to be honest. Right. We don't need our parents to be excellent. Most children have no such desire for that. I mean, even something as simple as a parent to tell a child, I messed that up really badly. I was wrong. I should not have said that to you like that. Parents don't say, you're not my mother. No. Kids say, it's all right, mom. In other words, you're still mama, right? Where kids get messed up with us, it's where we try to make contradictions into righteousness, right? Where we try to make the thing right just because it's what I said, right? And kids are like, that made no sense. It does.
Yeah.
And Jacob realizes that his grandparents did it and that he did it to Isaac. And he did, right? He absolutely, but his problem is that Isaac is so brilliant. Right. See, in this text, the thing I think that's so important is that, of course, biblically, this is the Abraham, Isaac, Jacob story, right? But of course, in this text, it's Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, right? The father and the son are inverted because that's what I think slavery did, right? I think slavery put the father at the foot of the son so that the son has to, in many ways, save the daddy. Right, if there's going to be salvation. It's this way in America. My father might have been able to read on a second grade level, perhaps. I have a PhD, right? So in our house, if reading was going to happen, I did it. It messed Dad up sometimes because he thought that because I was academically sharper than he was, that I got authority that he didn't. So he would say things like, read this to me, but don't get the big head.
Yeah.
I was like, what's the problem? And what I realized is he believed that there were certain excellences he was supposed to have over me, right? Because he was the father. And that probably is true. And it probably would have been true, right? If slavery had not interrupted the generational existence, right? In a place called West Africa. It probably would have been true, right? But what happens here is all of a sudden, you get a generation of kids who get, quote unquote, free. And now they have something that their mother, their father, their grandparents never had, right? And so now those people are looking to the children, right, to deliver them.
Flips everything on its head.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now Jacob is the father to Isaac.
And it never seems as though the father was comfortable with actually approaching him to have that forgiveness. Because there was a period where he's like, I was on my way, but I knew and kind of found an excuse to not do it. So that was even harder. And then to be asked, well, which one would you regret more? And having to sit with that.
God Almighty. How many of y'all read Don't Cry for Me? Oh,
All right, good. Because I was actually getting nervous. I was like, "Oh, am I giving away parts? Am I, I got the book, and I'm like about to read parts."
Yes.
Yeah.
When Jacob is on his way to see Isaac, and he exits off that freeway, right?
Yeah.
When see,
I got you.
listen, I'm telling you, I'm in bondage. I have to
You,
listen.
you can stand up.
Listen, I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Okay. Oh, okay, Marvel. Okay.
Yeah, let me get you. I got you.
Okay.
You could just start answering.
Okay. When Jacob is on his way to see Isaac, right? And Jacob exits the freeway. I was typing this, I remember, right? Can y'all see me? Am I okay, brother? Okay. I was typing this, right? And Jacob begins to exit the freeway, and I was like, no.
That's not supposed to happen.
I was like, Jacob, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
I remember this very well. I was
Yeah.
screaming this, and I was like, Jacob, what? I was thinking he's gonna get gas.
Right.
Right. I really was, seriously. And so Jacob pulls over right at this gas station, and I'm like, okay, so get back on the freeway. And when he begins to smoke the cigarette, I was like, he's not going.
Yeah.
I said, Jacob, why in the hell you've got to go? But what I realized is Jacob's fear of vulnerability trumps even his hope for love from his very own child. At least without knowing, he can hope and he can believe that Isaac might have embraced him and might have accepted him. But if he goes to Chicago, he's going to know. And the possibility that his own son would not want him would kill him. It would have absolutely killed him. So it's like, I can't know. I'm just gonna have to rest in the uncertainty, right, of hope, right? And I mean, that's a deep thing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's a really deep thing. And when you get to, I was about to say Isaac's song. God dog it. I can't talk about Isaac's song, though. Anybody read Isaac's song? Oh, God.
Oh, let it out.
I'm just gonna say this. I can say this. Isaac does a similar thing, right? Oh, okay. I'm not talking about anymore. Okay, but I do think that part is so critical because what it also shows is that in many ways, Jacob never matures, right? Yeah. That Jacob is always, in some ways, in emotional bondage, right? Because he just can't know, right? And I think this is part of the reason that Rachel leaves him, because Rachel is in many ways enlightened in some ways, and she certainly wants a certain kind of life, and it is one of knowing and openness and literature, et cetera. And when she realizes that, yes, she married a hardworking man, but she did not marry one who represents any level of intellectual openness or authenticity. She's like, oh, it's not gonna work, you know? And then when, as we know, seemingly she does the unthinkable to Jacob, Jacob, of course, is like, oh no, I'm out. But what he doesn't know is that she had been really symbolically and in some ways quite literally divorced from him for years before he leaves. And what I think this book is about also is the ways that Isaac constructs both of them in his memory for his own emotional well-being. But it's not the truth, either one of them, because she's not nearly as marvelous as he remembers, right? Yeah. In fact, when he comes out to her about his sexuality, she is outdone. Yeah. Right? And even this, Jacob, come over here and do something with this boy. And of course, Jacob's like, what the hell am I supposed to do with him? I've been telling you. I'm like, how did you not know? Right. Yeah. And what Isaac remembers is that his mother adored him. And that's what he has to hold on to in order to survive what he understands to be his father's ever-ready willingness to wound him. So he has to, in many ways, erase his mother's flaws, right? In order that he can, in many ways, hold on to his father's flaws, right? So that he can condemn his father as he exalts his mother. In other words, in many ways, what I think the writer's getting to at in this book is the way, well,
I had
really,
to process that for a second too. I was like, what? All right. Yeah. AKA you, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
sort of.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But not me, really.
Yeah, I got you.
I mean, really, seriously, it's the characters don't do what I would prefer.
Right.
They do not at all. They're like I would have had Jacob go to all the way to see Isaac. I absolutely would have had that.
That's why you would like stop.
Oh, I was
Get off the
I
exit.
was
Get off the
terrified.
exit.
I wasn't being dramatic. I am dramatic.
Yeah.
But I was being honest, right? I was really distraught with Jacob. I was like, man, why would you do this?
Right.
Because the characters take on a life of their own, right? They become their own entities. And that's important because if not, then each character is the author, right? And they have no personhood unto themselves, right? Characters have to do what authors don't like, disagree with, hate. Sometimes we cuss them out, they cuss us out, right? It's true. But what I also think is so critical here is you cannot have love without the willingness of hurt, right? Trying to figure out how I can love you without hurting you means you and I can have no relationship, right? If you're trying to figure out how not to be hurt, don't do love.
Right.
You can't do love. But that's in any, not just romantic, in any relationship, anywhere with anybody, right? Wounding comes along. And wounding is not necessarily an issue that somebody did you wrong, right? Wounding is the announcement, right? That you and I don't move through the world in the same rhythm, right? We are different human beings, right? We handle things differently. We think that every time I get my feelings hurt, somebody offended me. Not necessarily. It's not necessarily an offense. It's sometimes just a way of reading a thing differently. It happens all the time. You know, it's like I might have told you, I'm going to pick you up at 7 o'clock from your office, right? And I stop and get gas at 6:45. And when I stop and get gas at 6:45, I see a 3-year-old child, right, seemingly wandering by himself. I'm supposed to leave that child so I can be on time to pick you up? Who would do that? But then somebody else says, well, I'm just not a priority to see, here it goes, right? Well, it is true that in this instance, I did do a priority call, but I'm thinking you would have wanted me. No, why not come get me and then circle? No. You see,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I'm saying, well, what Isaac does is a tricky thing that all of us do, and that is Isaac constructs his own memories, right? And that's really what memory is. Memory is not history, right? Memory is not facts. Memory is not actually what happened. Memory is the emotional way you needed to process it, right? In order to maintain your well-being, right? Have you ever had friends, you know, who, y'all had some experience together, you know, when y'all went to, y'all went on vacation, right? And you're saying, oh my God, remember when we went to Florida on vacation and remember how it stormed when we arrived and the other person saying, wait a minute, no, it didn't rain that day.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, in fact, it was sunshine. Don't you remember that? What? No, I remember because I wore shorts. You know, we always try to give this evidence, right? I wore shorts that day. No, it did rain that day, right? And the reason I'm gonna tell you it rained that day is because I left my umbrella in the hotel.
Exactly.
You see, right. But the truth of the matter is, it can be true that neither one of you is actually accurate, because memory is not about the excellence of recalling information, right? Memory is the acknowledgement, right, that I need to process this experience a particular kind of way so that I can live with, right, how it evolved.
That made me think, and that's why I looked in the book real quick because I wanted to find it. Where, what was it? You have to the memories. You try to leave some of the memories.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, you can't bring memories.
I want to stop I'm gonna look. Just keep talking.
Yeah.
Find this.
Well, I really can. I really can. And I think I keep looking. I think this is important. I can't do
Do
it.
your thing.
I
Do your
just can't
thing.
do it. Y'all forgive me. I just can't do it. I do think this is important, though. I think this is very important because very often, when we're dealing with wounds and when we're dealing with, especially parents, we're trying to make someone else see and agree with the memory, right? Mama, this is what you did, right? And Mama, I need you to acknowledge that this is what you did. And then when folks say, no, I'm sorry. I don't remember it that way. It looks like somebody is not acknowledging the authenticity of your feelings, right? That is not what's happening here, actually. What's really happening is both of us process this in a way that neither one of us has the actuality of what happened.
So
Right.
I found the memory.
Okay.
The memory part. So when death came to me after your mother
yes.
died,
Oh,
I
yes.
wasn't surprised.
Yes.
When people die, she said, they want to leave unpleasant memories behind.
Yes.
Such remembrances are heavy and irrelevant in the afterlife, people
Yes.
think.
Yes.
Plus, they make travel through the universe difficult.
Yes.
But this is not allowed. Everything the heart has ever known must accompany it into eternity, regardless of the pain.
Yes.
Only then can a person see God. A whole heart is heaven's requirement.
Damn, he wrote that.
Yes, he did.
My God.
And I couldn't wait to talk to the person who wrote it.
Yes, yes. I think that's really important because it's like, when you finish a life, what does God want back from this? Right? People always tell us that, you're going to meet God again, right? Clearly God doesn't want the body. Okay, we got that, right? Then what is it that God wants, right? And it seems to me the very real possibility that what God wants, right, is the way you transformed a life into a living, right? Which, help me, oh God. It seems to me that God wants this notion of how did you come to terms with the gifts you have, the limitations you have, the power you have, right? The struggles you have, right? And how did you create an existence out of that produced joy? Whether you danced or you were paraplegic, right? What did you do with the essence of the thing, of the things you had in this realm, in this beingness? And it seems to me that God's applause is if you're saying, like a Harriet Tubman, I turned bondage, right, into a running, right? You go to heaven. I get right. Or like it makes me think of maybe like a Martin Luther King, right? Who, I became the voice of a people. Yeah. But I think if you tell God, I don't know that I ever figured out what I had. I don't know that I ever really came to terms with what I thought were the challenges of my life. I think I got dealt a bad hand. But see, what is hard to tell God, what God knows is you can still win a game of cards with a bad hand. It's the craft of the playing that's the issue, right? Not just which cards did you get, right? But how well did you play it? And if you just gave up and didn't play at all, I think you go to hell. Because at this point, then the precious gift you got, that thing called life, you're trying to give that back to God. I don't think God wants back the thing God gave you. God wants it transformed. And without it being transformed, I think you're in trouble.
So is Jacob forgiven?
Forgiven?
Mm-hmm. Is he forgiven by his son?
Oh.
Is that part two?
It is.
Oh.
It is. It is.
All right.
It is.
I got to pivot
I
now.
do want to, can I read something?
Yes.
May I read
Yes.
from my friend's book?
That brilliant person who wrote this.
If I could go back in time, I'd tell Charlie the truth and urge him to love his boy regardless. I tell him that every man chooses his own life and that a parent's job is to respect that choice. I might even tell him how I drove you away by wanting you to be something you were not. Now that I need you, I don't care what you are. Even if I weren't dying, I'd still need you. A man's son is his truth unadorned. When he can look at him and be proud, his fatherhood is complete. Mine never will be. I can't look at you now, and my pride in you is still in progress, although I've come a mighty long way. God will have to take me the rest of the journey. Perhaps you're a famous painter in Chicago. If you are, hopefully, you've rendered your mother on canvas. No one could capture her beauty, her elegance better than you. So if you haven't done this, get busy doing it. The world needs that kind of splendor on display. Last night, I lifted myself from the sofa with every ounce of strength I could muster, and I fell to my knees and cried out, "I'm sorry, Isaac." You weren't there, but you were there, standing before me, disbelieving that this day had come. You were the father, I the son, because I needed your grace, your forgiveness. Your mother had said it would come to this. And so here I am now. I can see the old ship of Zion easing across the water, coming quietly for me. You are in the prime of your life, loving some man freely, I suppose, but yourself mostly, I pray. If not, start doing it. Time waits for no man, Granddaddy used to say, and this is true. When you read this, Isaac, I'll be in the next world. Don't cry for me, son. I've cried enough for myself. And have no regrets about us. There is nothing for which you are to blame unless you've now made your own mistakes and hurt others, which you probably have. Every man has. But most of those hurts, at least many of them, are blooms of seeds I planted in you. You must learn to uproot unwanted seeds without destroying the entire harvest. This is the son's lesson. Nurture good sprouts, Isaac. Toss weeds aside and never think of them again. Just remember, sprouts and weeds are planted together. And weeds have a very valuable function. They teach you what to avoid, what not to embrace. There is no good planting without them. All I think of now is you. This means I love you. I feel it in my heart, I think, that sense that nothing and no one else matters. I've always wanted to know that feeling, and now I do. The sad thing, though, is that you won't hear me say, "I'm sorry." But I did say it. Perhaps in this letter you'll feel it, hear it in my tone, and let my words love you better than I ever did. Just one last thing. Tell people I tried. If there is a funeral and if you attend it, please tell them I tried. You are free to say I failed, for in so many ways that is the gospel truth, but at least say I tried. Recall, if you will, the few joys we shared, you, your mother, and I, and tell them I left you the house, although you didn't want it. Tell them about our trip to the land, how you loved it and later painted it more beautifully than I had remembered. Tell them you graduated from college debt-free because I paid the tuition. Tell them I wasn't always a good father, but I was always a man. And if possible, take me home. Whether in a casket or a vase, just take me home. Don't leave me in Kansas City. Honeysuckles don't bloom here in springtime. Neighbors don't drop by if they haven't seen you in a while. This is not my home. I cannot stay here. Lay me next to my brother beneath the little tree in the cemetery. I'll have peace then. If what Black people say is true, I'll meet Esau and never long for this world. I'll meet my mother too, and hopefully she will love me the way your mother loved you. I'll confront Granddaddy about what he did, and maybe he'll apologize, and we'll all be happy in eternity. I'll tell Grandma that her dream came true. Her great-grandson got a college education, but I guess she already knows. This is all I have to say. If this isn't enough, I have nothing else to give you. I give you my life. I would give you my life, but it's already spent. The most precious thing I leave you now is the land. It's yours. Never sell it. It will support you when the world casts you aside. If you end up like me with nothing and no one, you can always return to it, and it will love you and sustain you without judgment. If you don't think you want it, keep it anyway. It may be all you have one day. And finally, I leave you with this. Live your life freely, Isaac. Rise above our history. Rise above me. Be your own unapologetic self. Just remember one thing. I meant well. Even in my failure, just say I meant well.
So is he forgiven?
That's why I couldn't do the audio.
Exactly.
And the truth of the matter is, you do know.
Yeah.
Isaac's song is going to lay you out. If you're asking, you'll see if he's forgiven.
Okay.
You will absolutely see it. And the question really is, has he forgiven himself?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I'm not sure Jacob believes he has the permission to forgive himself until Isaac forgives him.
Right.
That's not really the way forgiveness works, but that's the way Jacob has understood it.
You know, one thing that actually jumped out at me too was that he was never okay with his son crying.
That's right.
But there was one time he actually did not have a problem with it, and it was when they were talking about the land.
Yes. Yes.
His son cried,
Yes.
and he didn't strike him. He didn't get angry.
Yes.
So it almost seemed as though, and I'm wondering what was going on in the mind of the person who wrote it, right? That was it that this was one thing that Jacob was able to give his son. So then when his son was crying, it was almost acceptable to cry over this because it was so important.
I think that, and I think something else too. I think the reason he's okay with Jacob crying there, with Isaac crying there, is because on the land, Jacob is a different man. The land gives Jacob context.
Right.
The land applauds Jacob's existence. The land says Jacob is a man. The land says we know you, right? On the land, Jacob is a human being, right? Jacob knows the soil knows him. And when Jacob sees, not just that he loves the land, but when Jacob, here I go again. When Jacob sees how much Isaac loves the land, Jacob is proud. Because for the first time, Jacob gets to be the author of something Isaac adores, right? Up to this point, it was always his mother, right? But now, Isaac is looking around and wondering like, oh my God, this is like a paradise. Is this cool? Is this yours? Jacob's like, hell yeah. Yeah, and he gets to share something with his son that really is a familial heirloom, right? This thing called the land, right? And so I think when Isaac weeps, it's because internally Jacob is too, about this land, about the joy of this land and what this land means and what it meant. And this is important also because for Black people in America, after Reconstruction, of course, all of us in this room know, there was this great migration of Black people away from the South because the South was so horrific, blah, 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 blah. Then get to the North and it's equally horrific, but you done spent your money, right? But what's true is moving North separated Black people, right, from the physical land itself. Because we did go north, but that wasn't our land. right? That soil didn't know our name. Why? Because our blood wasn't in that soil. We certainly did work in places like Chicago and Michigan and New York, et cetera. But in the South, this soil knew my grandfather. You see what I'm saying? So when Isaac steps foot on this soil, right, in many ways, Jacob has now done his due diligence of connecting another generation, right, to the tradition of what it means to be Black in America, and you have something that will sustain your existence regardless of what people do to you. Mm-hmm. See, the thing about land that Black people understood as being so powerful, help me God. The thing about land is, you could be poor but still eat. See, poverty in Chicago and poverty in rural Mississippi is not the same poverty. In poverty in Chicago, you're gonna be hungry, you got to steal something. But, you know, I grew up, in fact, in rural Arkansas, and there were days we had no money, but we ate all the time. Yeah. Because, you know, we had canned cabbage, green beans, so, you know, we always had something to eat because the land, you know, the land provides.
Ate off the land.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so really, in many ways, the land is a family member, right? The land, people connect to the land because the land is, for all practical purposes, providing the sustenance for the people who stand upon it. And Jacob knew this, Jacob understood this, Jacob understood the relation with the land and the ability, the right, the responsibility to teach that to a son. I mean, there's nothing that made him prouder. Right. Which is why when Jacob goes back to Kansas City, Jacob figures out the one thing I could do that just might make my daddy proud, right? He recreates the land, the visual, and it almost kills Jacob.
Right. Because he noticed the beauty that he didn't even notice.
Yes, absolutely. And the fact that he bore a son who could render. Yes.
I'm loud too. Then I'm gonna turn it over for questions because we'll be here all day, people. Right? I mean, let's say one last thing.
I thought this ended at 11.
I know, right? I don't even have my phone.
I don't know what time it is.
Me neither. Me neither. Time is fluid. But when my grandmother, so I'm from Brooklyn, but my grandmother grew up in South Carolina.
Yes, yes.
And I remember as she was getting ready to go home, as we say, she said to me, "Don't let anybody take my land." She said that. And I remembered, I was like, okay. So even though she would start talking out of her head, that always centered.
About that, sure.
She was always centered by that.
Sure.
And, you know, as we're talking about how reading was freeing, was liberating.
Absolutely.
And now this is all in the current political climate being taken away from us.
Right.
What this means. I mean, it's just so much to unpack.
Sure. And if I can, what really pisses me off.
Be quick, because I'm gonna turn it over to them.
Okay, about this administration. What really pisses me off about this administration, especially when it comes to people of color, is somebody, I'm not gonna call names, in this administration doesn't really realize, right, that we literally died for the right to read.
Yes.
Right? It wasn't a leisure pastime. I come from people who learned to read in order to literally construct their own freedom.
Yes.
And now you're going to say that literature is banned, right?
In a free world.
Yeah. Listen, don't even get me started.
Let's go. Let's go.
You know,
all right.
Don't even get me started. But the other thing that most people don't really know is in the 18th and 19th century, most white people couldn't read either.
Yeah.
See, it's not true that the white people in America were all literate and it was the Black and slave people who couldn't read. That wasn't true.
Right.
Most white people could not read at all. Right. So the notion of reading, right? What reading and literature really does, right? Reading and literature really moves a person from being basically human, right, to almost divine. That's what reading.
Drop the mic. Drop the mic. I was going to hand him the mic. Wait. Drop that. Right there.
I believe that though.
Yeah.
I really believe that. I really believe that. In fact, it's the lack of reading that has us with the administration we have. But I agree.
Absolutely. All right.
We have a round of applause for that incredible. Oh.
So much.
Thank you.
Yeah, y'all here, Connecticut, y'all have a smooth way of cutting people off. I like
That's all me, right? That's all me. Wait,
Because Clark Atlanta, we just
Yeah,
roll
yeah.
on, and it could be 9, it could be 11, and until the Holy Ghost gets finished.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why they got somebody from Brooklyn to do this.
Right.
They got somebody
That's
from
not.
Brooklyn. They got somebody from Brooklyn.
But okay.
So I really just want to say thank you both so much, so much. Before this event tonight, I wrote some words about what a gift it was going to be to bear witness to this conversation. And I couldn't have even imagined. So thank you. Thank you. So we do have a few minutes for some questions, and I think we have a microphone to be circulated around the room. We will take questions for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Okay.
It goes to 11. So.
And I will ask that you speak into the microphone for accessibility purposes. Even if you speak loudly, please still do it into a microphone. So can I invite our first question of the evening?
There's a young man.
So right.
Here's a young man right here.
Excuse me. Well, first, I want to thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much.
Yes, sir.
But as I read the book, I was sort of devastated because when I thought of slavery, I thought, okay, slavery is over. It wasn't over,
Yes.
and I just felt so devastated and guilty. I don't know why.
Yes, sir.
It was just unbelievable.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can assuage that guilt by buying 100 books. No, sir. I'm kidding, of course, sir. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But thank you very much. Seriously, thank you very much. And I think the thing, it's funny you mentioned this, sir. I'm just going so I can speak. Because this is the thing that I think has almost ruined America. And that is, we cannot tell the truth about our history. If we could tell the truth and tell it once, but really tell it, we could apologize to one another, we could be through with this, right? We could be through with this. But instead we keep doing this revisionist history, right? So people don't feel bad, right? It's like cheating on a person and never admitting it, right? Somebody really might be able to forgive you. We can walk forward, but you got to be able to stand in that truth first, right? And I think that one of the things that, again, this administration is saying is not only are we not going to do that, we're not even going to act like that happened at all, right? Which means it is the promise, right, of not only more, but even more intense conflict, right? So I think what you're saying is a beautiful thing, because I felt troubled by this too, and I wrote it, of course, right? But I really did, because in my head I said, that have I helped every young boy I could? Did I miss anybody? And I mentor 1,000 kids at Clark, quite literally, right? But I'm wondering, is there anybody I overlooked? Because I just feel like every young person deserves the possibility of healing and transformation, right? So I'm really just honoring the fact that you care, Elder. So thank you, sir.
I have the microphone. I am curious if there's any background on the character of the feminine mystique and how that fit in the story.
Yes, yes. So glad that it's, it was just a quick mention, but so glad that you picked up on that. One of the things I remember in graduate school is I read that book, right? And I was so fascinated by that book. And I was so fascinated by what I thought must have been a man's reaction to that book in the 1970s, right? So that's why I included it in the text. But I also included it in the text because there are challenges to racism, challenges to patriarchy, right, that have come and that sometimes have been dismissed, but they did come, right? And so we keep chipping away at these isms, right? Because I think part of the problem is there are pieces of it we like. We're just trying to figure out how to keep the pieces we like and get rid of the pieces we don't. The problem with patriarchy is that patriarchy is not obedient, right? It won't only show up when you invite it. If you invite it at all, it comes in its fullest force, right? So on one hand, I would love, it seems kind for a man to open the door for a woman, right? But then don't tell me what to do, right? What I've figured out, it took me years, but what I figured out is she really would do better by opening the door herself, right? Because the minute you concede a little bit to patriarchy, it wants domination, right? Patriarchy has no humility, right? And that's true with racism. That's true with misogyny. In other words, we can't play with oppressions as if pieces of oppressions can work. We've got to be a country, and I'm not there either, but we've got to be a country that hates oppressions, not the particular one that comes to me.
So on this side of the room, there's a couple.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
This was extraordinary and
Yes, ma'am.
delightful and so wonderful. I was reminded of a friend just the other day was telling the story about when he was going off to the army. His uncle said to him, be woke,
Yes.
right? Be proud, stand tall, look them in the eye, and fight patriarchy, right? The very next day, someone gave me a children's book, an African-American story of wokeness. And no clue that it wasn't the same definition that this political party is using now.
Right.
It's actually something so strong, and it reminds me of the characters in your book. So I wondered if that had any influence on you, and are there other authors that you particularly are proud of that you bring forward?
Sure. I have absolutely no allegiance to any of this wokeness, right? Because I think some of this is not at all what I think of as enlightenment, right? So I have very little allegiance to it. In fact, and I probably wouldn't even use it that way. The English teacher in me is I would rather a person be awakened, right? But I could break that down later. Yes, there are some authors who I just totally and absolutely. I have probably 10 or 15 books under my cover that are my bed companions, right? Quite literally, if you pull the sheet back, the books are there, right? So if anyone is going to sleep with me, they have to. Well, I mean, they have to contend, right. But there are ways to do. Okay, whatever. But seriously, I love Marilyn Robinson. She wrote a book called Gilead. Anybody heard of this book? Oh God. Her writing is so mellifluous, right? It's smooth as butter. It's just beautiful, beautiful. Marilyn Robinson, you'd like her if you never heard of her. I'm a huge James Baldwin fan, right? Yep. I love, I'm a Toni Morrison fan. No, I'm an early Toni Morrison fan, right? Yeah, I'm an early Toni Morrison. Some of Toni Morrison's writing, I don't know what in the world she's talking about, right? But some of the early writings I love. There's a writer named Jonathan Franzen I like, right? I like very much. I love Ernest Gaines, right? Ernest Gaines wrote a book called A Lesson Before Dying, Anybody read that? I'm telling you, people have not gotten that book. I can teach you that book, right? I wish we had 15 minutes for me to just. I love Ernest Gaines. I love Ernest Gaines. And then one other. I love Kaise Lehman, right? That he's a brother who wrote a book, a memoir called Heavy, that I think is really, really, really beautifully done. So I'm a reader just kind of by nature, as I'm sure you are. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Anyway.
I teach high school.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm an English teacher of high school students, and I'm super worried about my kids who don't read really. And I love all the books that you just mentioned, but what books would you recommend to 15-year-old boys?
I'm gonna tell you something else I'd recommend first, right? That I think would really be helpful, that I do in my college class, that students told me it hasn't happened since they were in second grade. The teacher read to them.
Yeah.
That's it. Don't ask them to read first. Most of them are poor readers, and so are their parents.
Oh yeah, with their phones away, with their
Yeah.
phones away.
Yeah,
somewhere.
and have them sit in a circle and you read to them, and then give them the book, right? And have them read aloud to you, right? I think that's very important. But let's see, what books would I recommend for a 15-year-old? A Lesson Before Dying.
Yeah.
I think would be
Yep.
yep. In fact, the main character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's in my library.
I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Are these primarily Black boys, white boys?
No, a lot of Hispanic students.
Okay, gotcha. Another book, what is the title of this book? It may seem young, but there's a book called The People Could Fly.
Yes. Yep.
Right.
It's in the library too. Okay.
Now,
Right.
it's children's book, right? But the way I have found that teenage kids, especially Black kids, absolutely eat that book alive, right? It's something magic. It's something absolutely magic because it's introducing to them, right, a kind of epistemological, ontological possibility, right, that we generally don't get afforded in this culture, right? So those are ones I'd probably start with.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
So up in the back, in the middle, can that mic go straight back?
Very loud, but I think it's on. Can you hear me? No. Okay.
Come on, CAU, I see you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. So my question to you, first of all, I just want to say that my son is an alumni of Clark Atlanta University. And I just want to thank you so much for being a part of that college and supporting by your teaching at a HBCU. So thank you so much for that.
But Madam President, I can be hired.
I know that's right. I wanted to say to you with my question, I just wanted to scream out like 2 or 3 times, preach, preacher, but I didn't say it. And so here is one of my questions. Do you believe that spirituality and the church play a major role in the lives still of Black and African Americans people today as they did 25 years ago?
Plays the same role in the lives of America. And part of the problem, I think, is that we have a spiritual system in America. We're trying to figure out how we can use the same spiritual system to live freely that once enslaved the people. Right? See, if we don't we've got to be bold enough as human beings to overhaul even spiritual systems. Right? See, if we were living in the same kind of house now that we were living in 100 years ago, it would make no sense to us. But we are spiritually living in the same house. That house is desperately in need of renovation. We might need to tear it down and rebuild it. That doesn't mean we don't need a spirituality, but we gotta admit that if the book says slaves obey your masters, which it does say, right? We've got to agree to take that out. See, if we don't do that, right, then what we're figuring out now is how can slavery be sweet? How can it be kind? Right? It cannot be. It can, women be silent in the church. Oh, so let's see. You don't hit women, but you dishonor them. See, the point is you got to overhaul the spiritual thing also, right? And I think the church needs an overhaul badly. Black, white, Latino, every church, it needs an overhaul badly, right? I really think we need another Bible, really, quite frankly, right? I do. I literally do. And I'm about 3/4 of the way into writing one, right? I am. No, I'm quite serious. Yeah, it'll come out later I'm thinking it'll come out. No, I'm being really serious. I'm probably 200 or 300 pages deep. And I think this is important because human beings wrote the first one, right? God didn't write that. A human being wrote it. People say inspired by God. I'm inspired by God daily, right? Yes, I think this is very important. And so I think unless and until we can get to the place where we can challenge what somebody said God said, right? If it does not honor that being, right? We are in spiritual incarceration.
So would you like to drop the microphone on that one? Or take one more question? Do we have one more question? Anyone want to ask one last question, or do we want to leave it where we have one more?
I got to pick it back up.
Drop it again.
No, I'm not.
So this question follows up on what you were just talking about,
Yes,
because
ma'am.
you wrote about it in Black on Black, which I thought was so thought-provoking and so challenging about a lot of ideas that we have. And I would like you, if you would, to comment. I read that at the same time that we were beginning to experience what this administration is doing in wiping out every DEI
Yes.
initiative that we
Yes.
have, and with it, wiping out every reference that we have to any history that isn't
Yes.
a white supremacist
Yes.
history.
Yes.
So I wonder if you would comment on what you think the long-term effects of that are going to be, and what we can do if that's going to be wiped out systematically, and in our educational systems, what we can do in our small worlds around us to counteract those long-term effects.
Okay, two things. And one of these I'm going to say off the record, right? But I'm going to tell you what I see as the first effect of what I think is happening, right? I see it so clearly. If this administration is not very careful, these edicts are going to absolutely lead us back to segregation. I see that coming. I see it coming. I see it coming so clearly, because this is Jim Crow, right? You can't read this. You can't go here. This isn't allowed. You can't talk about this. This book is bad. I was like, as I've taught my students, this sounds unbelievably familiar to me. I wasn't alive, but I've studied it, right? And I never thought I'd be alive to see it, right? But here it is again, But there are places where I can talk about Black stuff, but it's with Black people, right? That's just segregation all over again, right? I think that's coming. I really, really do believe that's coming. The second thing I'm going to say is, if we let that happen, shame on us, right? Shame on us. Shame on us. Because really what really should have happened during integration, one magical moment America missed. The magical moment America missed is when Black children were shipped and bused to white schools. White kids should have been bused to Black schools. If that had happened, we'd have a different nation. Why? Because white kids would have grown up under the tutelage of Blackness and would have had to respect Black authority in a way that they've never had to. It is the respect of Black authority in America is always optional. Many people choose it, but you don't have to. You don't have to. The respect of white authority is a mandate if you're Black, though, right? And what I'm saying here is what Democrats have to do, and I am really progressive-minded people, we have to get as what's the word I want to say? This is the off the record part. We got to be willing to fight as naked and ugly as these folks in office. A book is banned. We got to say, no, the hell it is not. No, it's not. I'm going to read it and I'm going to teach it. Right? Because see, in a minute, if enough people did that, right, you can't fire the whole school district. Right? The reason you can fire 1 or 2 people is because 99% of other folks are too scared to stand on anything. Right? So we've got to be able to stand because the folk in this administration are bold enough to even say the Constitution doesn't even matter. Right? I don't even care, which means somebody has got to say, not only does it matter, not only does it matter, right, but in fact, you're going to obey it. Right? But see, if we don't get that, what's going to happen is all of us are going to be in our silos of fear. And we're just going to live that way because, oh my God, something's in office. And what can you do? You can't do nothing about it. That's not true. Of course we can. We've got to band together and we have to be bold enough, right, to understand that what he's doing, and yeah, there are millions and millions of people who agree with him and support him, sure, right? But there are millions more of us who don't, right? And we've got to say, enough of this bullshit. We got to say, no, that's what I'm no, absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody who cares enough, we've got to say, oh no, today's the end of this. Yeah.
So please join me in another warm, ruckus round of applause. So please do join us. There's a book signing right outside of the space and some refreshments. So the conversations can continue. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.